Hello, class. Welcome back. We have some new scenarios. Some of them are similar from last week. And what I'm going to do is just read it to you. Okay. The scenario is, I team interpret at an 8 a.m. college class. The student arrives at class 10 or 15 minutes late most days. Now, 3 weeks into class, my team interpreter starts showing up for class 15 minutes late every day. Sometimes she doesn't even beat the deaf student to class because she knows I'm always on time. I'm starting to get angry, but rocking the boat isn't my style. So what do you think the interpreter should do? Rock the boat? Talk to the other, okay, talk to the other. Well, what should they say to the other interpreter? What?
You need to stop being late. You should be equal. You should be there.
So you're just going to go up to this other interpreter and say, you need to stop being late.
Usually, no, I would, but.
Well, because you got to think about, you're not exactly their boss, so, and you're going to have to keep working with this interpreter, possibly on other assignments too.
I think you should use I feel statements. Sometimes I can use I feel this way when you're charting this, whatever, and explain how it impacts the situation for the client. Because it's not about you or the other interpreter, it's about the client. And when you don't have the feed, there's a concept that you're missing. I mean, that's not fair.
Sorry. I forgot to start the timer, but it's only been a couple of minutes, so we're good. Anyways, yeah, I agree. The I feel statements are interesting, but remember that would be coming from you, yourself, that you are feeling uncomfortable. The interpreter might not care how you feel. What do you think? I'm sorry, Erica.
Okay.
A reminder of the code of professional conduct, respect for consumer and respect for colleagues.
Okay.
And that's something important that she should remember, she should politely be reminded of.
Mhm.
And said this, situation affects the consumer and it affects our interpretation dynamic, and as a team we could be affected by it.
Right. Erica.
I agree with Diana, and I also think that you should tell them, just be like, oh, I've noticed that you've been coming a little bit later. I just want to remind you the class starts at whatever time. I know sometimes the schedules change, and just kind of like try to seem like you're trying to help them and not like you're trying to tell them what to do. Because that often makes people feel like, oh, yeah.
Okay, what if after you talk to this person, they continue being late? Then
You
what?
want to go see a higher person?
Like, okay, yeah, I
You work for an
understand.
agency, you want to see the person above them.
Okay. Anybody else want to say anything about that? Why was that? Guaranteed appointment. You're guaranteed for appointment. Okay. So, are you saying that you would speak to the interpreter first? Because that's what I'm
Yes.
gathering.
Yes.
Oh, great. So good. I'm really happy about that. Because a lot of people might not do that. Because, like you said, rocking the boat isn't her style. But, I mean, you could rock the boat. But, yeah, definitely. How is somebody going to improve if you don't tell them or point something out to them? I think that's really important. Really important lesson. And also you might want to describe that, arriving late, it creates a distraction. Not only, to the deaf student and the interpreter that's going, but the class, the teacher. Okay. Also, let's say the interpreters are there and they're sitting there and they're waiting for the deaf client to arrive. What should they do? Joanna? I can't can't hear you.
Because I'm trying to think to myself, like, what do you do in that situation? Because you're waiting for the deadline, you're on time, so now what do? I'm assuming this has already been there, so you probably already have your scene set up and you're waiting. I know you can't be there forever because if there is a time limit, I understand you're supposed to wait, and then if nothing happens, well, you showed up, you did your part, I guess the person's not coming.
Shannon, what do you think?
My first response was going to be that maybe if it's not one of the longer classes, they can possibly stay and listen to what's going on, and then the next class, when the deaf client shows up, they have a little bit of background of what's going on.
Exactly. Exactly what I was looking for. So this is considered your prep time, your preparation time. You need to know what's going on in that class before the deaf client arrives, because when the deaf client arrives, yeah, it's their fault, they're gonna be lost. However, you know what the topic is at least. So you can be able to produce some signs that make sense, right? Okay. So the interpreter perspective that they have in the book here, it says to discuss it with your team interpreter, which we already talked about. Remind them about their obligations. It's their job, right? And the need to understand the information from the beginning of the class. So they're not lost when they arrive. Their off time is the prep time, and if it continues to report it to a supervisor. So we basically got it. The deaf consumer says, report it to the supervisor. Yeah.
Don't play that.
Yeah. I mean, so there's different perspectives, obviously. In my opinion, I would say definitely try to work it out with the interpreter first. For anything, I mean, that's a given, and so that you'll be able to work with each other in the future, cohesive as a team. Shannon?
I think maybe the reason why the deaf consumer is saying to report it immediately is because it's his or her time with the interpreter, and he wants to understand the class, and so he wants to make sure that things are running effectively and smoothly as possible, as opposed to the interpreter and talking to the other interpreter first, because we all need to have good relations with everyone else.
Right, exactly. And it does say deaf consumer perspective, so I'm thinking more along the lines of the deaf person as an interpreter, him or herself. But yeah, I agree with you. The consumer, they can take it upon themselves, empower themselves, and go straight to the supervisor. This is a service that should be provided to them. However, I do feel that the deaf person should talk to the interpreter first as well. Because getting it from above, I mean, it's not like you said something and they keep doing it, right? So tell them once, they do it again, then go to the supervisor. It's like anything. Another thing they said, as long as it doesn't affect the interpretation, it's the team's problem.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And if it does affect the interpretation, I will speak to the supervisor myself. All right, so another scenario. What should an interpreter do when her team interpreter is wearing a totally inappropriate shirt, such as plaid or paisley? In my book, plain tops that contrast with the skin color are a basic rule, not a choice. Should the team interpreter mention it, keep quiet? In most situations I've been in, I've mentioned that the appropriate clothing to the interpreter with varying but often negative results. Let me check in the book to make sure I wrote it correctly. In most situations I've been in, I've mentioned the appropriate clothing to the interpreter with varying but often negative results. Often I hear the deaf person doesn't mind it. Why should you care? I have seen this happen with a wide range of interpreters, from novice to experienced interpreters. Am I way off base to mention this to my team interpreter and expect this adherence to the dress code? Lydia?
I would offer them like a sweater or something that I would already have, and then I would mention if they feel like offended or whatever, like why am I bringing it up? Like I have to watch them and see if they're following everything and see if they need help too. So that's why it would be better if they were just in solid code.
Great point.
Your team leader should be professional.
Mm-hmm.
And just because,
Anything else?
Just
Diana?
because
Wait. I'm sorry.
Well, I think it would be like what Lydia said, you know, hand them a jacket that you might have, and if she does get offended by it, well, you know, to simply say, well, it's distracting not only to the person, not only to the client, but also to me. Sitting and watching you, I can't see what side you're facing. So let's say that client isn't even affected, it doesn't matter. For me, being your team interpreter, that might bother me. I might miss signs. I might miss something.
just because the client doesn't mind doesn't make it right for her to break some, let's call it appropriate rules that we have to follow in our profession. Just because the consumer doesn't mind, we still have to be professional anyway. We have to be effective.
Right, we're still trying to make sure that we are acknowledged as professionals. So even though the deaf client is like, wear jeans, you're good to go, sneakers, it's fine. If you have a little logo here, I don't care, it's alright. Still, you reflect on other interpreters as well. You gotta keep that in mind. So whoever comes after you is gonna have to deal with those repercussions.
I think also something that seems to be drilled into us in all these classes is expect the unexpected. Let's say if you're interpreting for a class and you know that student doesn't normally care, but maybe there's a new student that day and you have to take on their responsibility and interpreting for them as well, and it is distracting for them. It's kind of just a matter of always being consistent, always being in that frame of mind.
Right, and if class is canceled and you're sent to another assignment, then what are you gonna do, right? Okay, all good points. Anybody else? Okay. It says, for the interpreter perspective, hope the deaf person mentions it. Okay, yeah, you always want to empower the deaf person. Ask if the interpreter has ever received any complaints about their attire. Oh, no.
Frankly, I think that would be more offensive than handing them the jacket.
Yeah, I like that idea that you're saying to hand them your sweater.
They'll probably be like, I get really good compliments on this. Everyone loves this shirt.
Oh, you something about your attire. But don't worry, don't fret. I have an extra right here. But for future reference, don't forget to have your own backup attire in your car. Okay. Explain physical requirements of a visual language and demonstrate it through respect and awareness. Yeah. So basically, you're saying not only the deaf client are gonna have to watch you, but I'm gonna have to watch you too and be your team interpreter. Come on now. The deaf consumer says, suggest them to replace the top or carry extra clothing for the future. As you said. If the deaf person doesn't care, why should you? If that's how they respond.
That's what the deaf person said?
Yeah. Let's say that the other interpreter says, you know, if the deaf person doesn't care, then why should you? How would you respond to that?
Because your attire reflects on me also. It's not just a reflection of yourself. We're here as a partnership. So if you're not dressed appropriately, then I look bad too.
Exactly. And also, let's say that interpreter says, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm fine. No thanks. Report them. Okay, that is one option to report them. What's another option?
Maybe you could try explaining the fact that since we are professionals and there are certain rules we have to follow as professionals, maybe that would be like a food for thought thing for them. And then maybe that continues, then they obviously have
They already
no
said no.
respect for it.
That's what they said.
No, I'm not going to change.
Next
No,
time,
no.
I just don't want the interpreter to with me,
you don't
call
like-
the agency and I'll say, I don't, I don't feel comfortable working with her.
Mhm.
I want you to send me with another interpreter, with another team.
Exactly, and it's
If
probably
she doesn't get any
likely
more
that
work.
this interpreter has done this in the past with other interpreters, and therefore you're just one of those next interpreters in line to tell the agency or whoever that anytime you have an assignment working with that specific interpreter, do not call me. I am not working with that interpreter. You know, in a nice, professional manner, of course.
Did you tell them why, or you just say,
Jeez.
Well, I'll give you a reason why.
Well, it depends obviously on the situation. I mean, I would be more inclined probably to explain why. However, you have to think about things. I mean, it's a business. I mean, yeah, if it's through an agency, they probably want to know how are there interpreters out there. They don't get feedback. Maybe they do contact their the people that they contract with, and ask them, you know, are these interpreters showing up on time? Are they looking professional? Is communication happening? Maybe they are asking those appropriate questions, but maybe they're not.
I mean, making surveys with.
Right.
with customers.
Right. So how they can improve it. Erica, if you're gonna do that, outside. Okay, so what was I gonna say about that? Yeah, so you can just request, not to be called to work with that interpreter again. Now, moving on to some tips. Okay. Consumers have their own idea of what the role of an interpreter is. Be sure that you communicate clearly what you see as part of your role and what you do not. Okay? Maybe the teacher's asking, oh, can you make copies? No, I cannot make copies. Why can't you make copies? You're just sitting
That's not
there.
my job.
Huh?
That's not my job.
I wouldn't say that.
It's beyond the scope of my profession. Because that's something.
Okay, or something along the lines of, you need to be there for the deaf student if anything arises and any emergency situations, things of that sort. I'm here to interpret.
I'm not a teacher's assistant.
But you could say I'm not a paraprofessional. That's another, you gotta be careful. You don't want to say teacher assistant. Okay. When interpreting on the telephone, describe what the deaf person is doing if she is not signing. For example, just a moment, let me get a pen. It could keep the other person from hanging up. Okay? So, for example, for video relay service interpreting, if they are saying, oh, hold on. If they're doing something and you can tell what they're doing, it's not considered adding, but you can say, hold on, I'm looking for a pen. I'll be right back. Once you say, I'll be right back, or hold on, that person on the other line, that hearing person, will wait until somebody else comes on. If you leave them hanging, they're gonna be like, hello, 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 close. Oh, yeah. You know, and hang up. All right. Flexibility keeps us sane and consumers happy. We learned that in our classes. Learn all you can about overuse syndrome and make sure you don't become a victim. What are some things that you can do to prevent overuse syndrome?
Hold up your hands before walking.
How?
Some basic exercises.
In cold weather, you can wear gloves.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, take them off when you get there, but I mean, while you're on the way.
But what if you have? What if you're in Washington D.C. and you have to interpret outside a platform presentation or something like that?
They sell like not pocket warmers, like the hand warmers that you keep in your pocket when you're off. Hands in your
Oh, that's a
pocket.
great idea.
Yeah, maybe you just.
And keep like moving so your muscles don't get stiff.
Yeah, but I definitely agree. I think, I mean, your health is most important. So if your hands are freezing, it's never good to interpret when your hands are cold, by the way, okay? So yeah, if your hands are freezing, you can wear gloves, but make sure they're gloves that they're going to be able to see your hand. You can maneuver your fingers and things of that sort. It depends. What are you wearing, first of all?
I know, but I picture
What's the
like
background?
a waitress.
Where are you?
Because on the homework said, you know, the interpreter is you only pair of white gloves on. How white gloves look appropriate, but I guess.
Or like
I would
sequins.
see some people wear skin tone gloves.
Light up gloves.
I have glow in the dark gloves.
I have light up gloves, like for
Those
ultra.
wearing a black shirt and the white gloves might be able to, yeah, contrast with the shirt, maybe make the signs a little more clearer, if you will, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Keep your sense of humor. Okay. Consider how these two terms differ: professionalism and profession. The first has to do with our individual behavior, and the second is the culmination of all of us. So we kind of touched upon that tonight. Tonight already. And what is your contribution to the profession? Remember that whatever you do, you are setting a precedent for the next interpreter. We also discussed that too. Ethics has to do with right and wrong. So follow your intuition as well as your ethical training. Remember your sense of fairness. If you can't sleep at night because of an interpreting assignment, talk confidentially to another interpreter about what is eating you. Have a way of dealing with overwhelming feelings. So yeah. There's some places, some jobs, like especially for VRS interpreting, they have hotlines that you can call and you can speak to people, because sometimes it gets really tough. You know, they're talking about situations where somebody has passed away and their family, and they're crying, and they're talking about funeral arrangements and wills, or maybe they're arguing, and maybe they're talking about jail, or they're calling someone in jail. I mean, there's lots of emotional types of phone calls. So there are ways that you can be able to trust somebody enough, because yeah, we have to keep confidential about our assignments. You're not really supposed to go home and tell your family and your best friends and things like that. So there are ways. Make sure you confide to someone that can keep things confidential, can understand, you know, and also try to keep everything as much as possible confidential without breaking the code of professional conduct. Any questions? No? Oh, the lights. Okay, I think we're good. Let's stop.
So going.